Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Mirikitani, along with Mark Ostrander and Grant Turner. We are weighing in, brought to you by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear. Gentlemen, before we get started, happy Thanksgiving.
Yep, I'd like to wish everybody happy Thanksgiving, and I'm thankful that wrestling's back full go, and we got open tournaments going on and a lot happening.
Yeah, I was at an open tournament this past weekend. I saw the illustrious Grant Turner. We actually watched the Minnesota-Oklahoma State duel together with some Wingstop. So the Wings bet was paid in full. So, but yeah, GT, your crew looked good this weekend, man. Like 5 champs I read. It's hard to keep track of all of it. I was doing the commentary, but a lot of Grandview singlets in those semifinals and finals for sure.
Yeah, it was a great tournament. Life puts on a pretty good tournament down there. Got to see a whole bunch of the teams from the Southeast. I'm very excited about the growth of wrestling down there. So really cool to see some of these programs getting their toe in the water down there. It's great.
Yeah, we should give a shout out to Omi Acosta, Quentin Haynes, Ali Muhammad, Nate Stadaker. All those guys are former wrestlers for you. I coached against Omi, I coached Quentin, and I coached against Nate. I didn't cross paths with Ali, but Nate helped me do the play-by-play. Ali ran the camera and jumped in a little bit on the play-by-play. And those guys, along with Quentin, took me out Friday and took us out Saturday. So good people. It's cool because I know you guys both want to beat each other, but it's awesome. Just, it's a friendly rivalry. I know you guys, you're going to fight tooth and nail in March, but there's a lot of love and respect I can tell just from being on the outside of it. So anyway, let's get into it. So first thing, Emma Bruntle goes into the portal. She scored 26 points at the Nationals last year for McKendree. That's a lot. As all of us have coached, when you lose that many points at this point in the season, it's not only a point loss, but it's a morale loss to your team. Sam Schmitz is one of the best coaches in the country, men or women, period. But that's a big blow. Mark, you've obviously coached the national championship team. When you think about losing a Bruntle type of wrestler, first of all, where do you think? I have a very good idea where I think Bruntle will end up, but what do you think about that?
Well, it's not good for the program, obviously, but she has to do what's best for her. I have no idea where she's going to go. I would think maybe Iowa would be a spot, but they don't start wrestling until 23, so she'd have to sit out another year. So, that's something that these young ladies and young women have to think about if they're going to go into a portal and they want to be at the first, wrestle for Chung, they got to sit out. So, that makes a difference, I think. And I'm not sure of all the rules that are going to go on. And I'm sure they'll be wrestling in open tournaments, next year, the girls from Iowa. So, but yeah, it's devastating for a program. But, David, you and I did junior college. So we had kids for 2 years and then we rebuild. So we were rebuilding every year. So it wasn't as hard on us as it would be a 4-year school when you're losing probably your key component to your team in 26 points, 28 points scored at the national tournament, like you said. That's hard to replace with anybody.
I don't care how good my team was. If I lost 26 points, I would not wake up in a good mood the next day. I wouldn't care if I was a junior college or a team that had 10 national champions. So GT, you're obviously at Grandview. They've got a women's program. I think the bigger story here is women going into the portal. I think it's, hey, there's movement. And this coincides. I just recorded Matt Chat yesterday, Tuesday. We're recording this on Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving. And super lucky to have Clarissa Chun as my guest. And I'm a big fan of Clarissa, in terms of her wrestling style. My observation of her as a human being, but you're probably a lot closer to her than I am, Grant, just from being around so many of that stuff. I was super impressed by her. I rarely promote Matt Chat on weighing in, but I would tell people she was a very, very entertaining podcast. And I think people enjoy watching it. People probably have a little extra time over the holiday. What's your interaction been like with Clarissa?
Yeah, I mean, she's one of the best coaches in the country. And I think that, I don't know if we had discussed this previously. I think that we had maybe done it off air, but, I think the USA Wrestling staff with Steiner, Chun, and Jess Medina, they're doing great things for women's wrestling internationally. You can see that from the results from, the junior team, the U23 team, and the senior team. They're a powerhouse now. And Chun's been a part of that, as an athlete and as a coach or mentor, since 2008 and since Beijing, when she was, a medalist there. So I just think Iowa got it right. I think that, it's a very, very good hire for them. I think that she's going to do well at the collegiate scene. And I think also just being the first Division I or NCAA Division I school to sanction a team, I think it was the right person to get in Iowa City. So, very impressed by her. And I think that, the sky's the limit for her program there.
She talked about her relationship with Terry before she was there. Like Terry had, they had interaction at the Olympic Training Center. She talked about what it was like to walk into Carver Hawkeye as an athlete versus as a coach. She also had a super sweet Nike Iowa women's wrestling quarter zip on. Slightly jealous. I'm not going to lie.
Those are like exclusives. I don't think that there's very many of those been made yet. So I'm pretty sure that it's like a one piece only type thing right now.
I had the feeling. But yeah, she's very gracious. And, she talked about how many texts and emails and DMs and everything else she had gotten. So I want to publicly thank her for making time to get on the show. Cause it was not that long after the announcement and after her appearance and everything else.
Hey, David.
Yes, sir.
One thing I noticed about her when she was being interviewed is that she gave all the credit to all the people that are around her. She took very little credit for herself. She knows she got into a position where she's just excited to be there. She's just such a humble person. And I think the athletes that come there are going to really enjoy wrestling for her, knowing that it's not about her, it's about them. She talked about how building a team and is going to make the difference how good they are, how close that team knit's going to be. And I think that's huge. And I'm really looking forward to seeing who she brings in as assistant coaches. That's going to be amazing. I think she's going to bring in some high level coaches to help her.
Yeah, I would expect to be a heavy hitter staff. Don't tell everything she said, Mark. We actually want a few people to watch my other podcast, so that'd be great. I did put a little time into the questions, so I'd like people to actually watch that one. All right. So this past weekend, ton of big dual meets and really a lot of upsets in terms of rankings. So it was a short week. We didn't ask our guy, Christian Thompson, to compile all the rankings because a lot of people don't have them out till Tuesday night. We're recording on Wednesday morning and didn't want to have to go through that. So what we're going to do, Flo put an article out on all the upsets. We're going to go through that weight by weight, and then we'll also show in Intermat how their rankings worked. We'll pick Win and Open Mat and somebody else next week. Felt like the simplest way to do it. So at 125, Mastro beat McKee and beat him very soundly, 9-4. Corey Cabanban beat Teskey. Heinzelman beat Latona, and Jagger Ice, the Minnesota backup, majored Liam Cronin. Turikina also beat Cronin. Cronin had a bad weekend. He lost to Tanner Jordan, and Medley beat Manchio. I'll just go first quickly. Mastro looked really good against Pat McKee. GT and I watched that match. It really was not in. If you didn't know who was ranked higher, you would have thought it was the other way. And I think Latona is just cutting a lot of weight. That could be complete conjecture on my part. Obviously, it's just he's tall. But I think Blake Heinzelman is sort of starting to come into his own. I think he's gotten a little stronger for the weight. And I think he may be working his way up into that blood round match and might be able to sneak himself into an AA. Either one of you guys, I guess, Mark, you're obviously in Iowa. You saw a couple of these results, like at Daktronics. What struck you about that as interesting?
Yeah, I think, like you said, Cronin had a really hard weekend, because I know he puts in a lot of time and he's in good shape this early in the year because I've seen him wrestle earlier. Brody Teske did not have the tournament he wanted. Sometimes I think we forget that their first outing is usually not going to be near their best. So it takes these guys a little while to get their motors going. They're going to go back and they're going to work on things in the next 2 or 3 weeks, and you're going to see a whole different style of wrestling by, I think, all these guys come December.
Yeah. So GT, we look at the rankings. Arujau moves up to 33. And then, so that's where number 3 went. Number 6 dropped all the way to 11. Number 5 dropped to 10. That moved basically 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 up. Heinzelman moves up from 14 to 9. So you've already got 1, 2, 3, 4 new people in the top 8 after, but within the month of November. This is going to be an interesting way to nationals, right? GT, a lot of it's just going to depend on kind of how it goes at the seeding, the national qualifiers and kind of the draws.
Yeah. I think, once again, if you look at some of the Big Ten guys, Spencer Lee hasn't wrestled yet. D'Agostino hasn't wrestled yet. Carnendale hasn't wrestled yet. Or that's not a Big Ten, but you just got a couple of guys that haven't done anything yet, so you don't really know.
Yeah.
So once again, this stuff will even itself out. But there's some good wins already for some of these guys that will go into that seeding meeting, just because all those guys are going to get good quality wins throughout the year. So you're going to get a little bit of head-to-head type stuff. But yeah, I think it'll even itself out.
The match we didn't get this weekend at 125 was Lee and Glory. Lee didn't weigh in, so then Glory decided not to weigh in. So then Iowa got a forfeit it that way. To me, it kind of feels like Lee is on level 1. Mark and I talk about this a lot, tiers. Feel like Glory and Courtney are on tier 2. This isn't like anything scientific, it's just my feeling. And I feel like Lamont all the way down to like D'Agostino or even Master Giovanni are all on a good day could be in that semifinal against Spencer Lee. So we jumped to 133. Here's the rankings, and then here are the upsets. So Malik Hines pinned Mickey Philippi with a defensive fall from the bottom. He was losing 5-4, but he's got kind of a wonky overall record. Mark and I were looking at that on WrestleStat. He's got some other sort of troubling losses, and then sort of the same thing with Moses Schwartz. He beats Madrigal. It feels like Madrigal sort of having the year he did last year, where he has a high ceiling, low basement, and that changes the rankings a little bit. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So Mark, you and I talked about this off air, but where would you have put Vito Arujau in the rankings at 133?
Well, I'm pretty sure he got 4th.
Well, he's fifth. He's 5th here.
Okay, but I mean, he got 4th the last time he wrestled at the national tournament. So I would probably have put him in right where they did, maybe ahead of Corbin Myers. I don't think you can go wrong either way. I think that's kind of where you have to put him to start the year out. Okay. I think they did a good job there. I really do.
Yep. And Madrigal's sort of the big dropper there. He goes from 8 to 19. Chiarini is a 3rd-year freshman from St. Louis. He gets into the lineup for North Carolina State. So shout out to him. His little brother wrestled in the main event at Border Brawl and beat John Smith's son, Sam. And, so like you guys said, I think GT mentioned some of these kids haven't wrestled. Like you look at Chris Cannon, he's 0-0. Dylan Ragusin already has 9 matches. It'll be interesting to see what these guys' bodies of work are by the end of the year. But we've got there's not been a ton of change here. So, GT, I like the semi matches, like RBY against Vito would be a fascinating semi, don't you think?
Yeah. I think, Corbin Myers is a beast. I think Vito at 33 is very interesting to me. I totally agree with Mark. I think he's right where I would have put him in the rankings.
Yeah.
And then once again, I think you're going to see a lot of you're going to see a lot of variables between, like Ragnarsson and, all these guys in the Big Ten. I mean, they're going to shake each other out. So like, there's going to be like, I don't think, maybe AD is, right behind RBY. I think those guys are going to have great matches. It's just, we'll see where everybody else lays out. But the Big Ten is very interesting at this weight.
Yeah, you got Cannon, you got Lucas Bird, Rayvon Foley, Sammy Alvarez, Dylan Ragussin, Brock Hudkins. A couple of those guys are move ups. Even Matt Ramos is a move up and a transfer. So you're right, that weight's deep. Shout out to my guy, Trey Crawford. He's in the rankings right now. He's actually in for Matt Schmidt, but beat Kellen March and some guys like that. So he gets into the rankings. He's one of Jason Keck's kid from Greater Heights and Park Hill High School. Okay, 41. North Carolina had a rough week of traveling, but Keyshawn Clark got it done, beat Chad Redd 3-1. Dusty Hone beat Saul Irvin and then lost the wrestle off to Carter Young. And then Carter Young lost in the Minnesota duel. And then Delgado beat Martinoni. So there's not a ton of movement here. The other thing I should go back and mention is Greg Diakomahalis will be at 25 for Cornell. So that's another guy to throw into. Let's see. That's a weight, going all the way back, for years where freshmen have had a big impact, like a Megaludis, have a huge impact at nationals. So Dylan Duncan comes down from 49 to 41. I'm just looking at that. That kind of snuck by the goalie there, GT. I hadn't really seen that. But he hasn't wrestled. It's just a notification. Chad Redd drops from 5 to 11. Clark moves up from 13 to 10. They kind of met him in the middle. I look at this weight. I think a super dangerous dude outside of the top 8 is Alirez, who beat Hart the week before. When you look at this bracket, GT, what are you looking at matchups or, potential stuff we'll see at Cliff Keen or down the line that you're excited about?
Well, I mean, I didn't really watch a lot of Keyshawn Clark before. Then when we were chatting during the duel, I got a chance to watch that match pretty intently. And I've seen a lot of Chad Redd over the years, but I think that matchup could happen again, at a larger tournament. So I would love to see that match happen again, just because I think those guys are, very explosive wrestlers.
Yeah.
And then I think there's a lot of I don't know, like some of the fireworks. I'd love to see like Dom Demas, mix it up because he's always electric when he gets a chance to maybe hit some big moves against any of these guys. Alirez is, he's super talented and on the way up. So I think, I'd like to see, like a Demas Alirez Big 12 final. But, Carlson's a beast too. So it could, the semis in the Big 12 for this one could be lights out. Could be a lot of fun because Alan Hart is also a monster. So
he's right in there. Yeah.
He's right. And once again, that's that blood round, all-American caliber matchups, which we all love to see in the quarters or in the Conci quarters.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a lot of fun to watch.
So Marco, I'm looking at this. 7 of the top 15 guys are in the Big Ten, including the top 5. Lee, Ironman, Misek, Rivera, Duncan. Then you have Chad Redd, and then you have Parker Filius. And then in the Big 12, as GT mentioned, Demas, Carlson, Alirez, Alan Hart. I know you're going to be at one of those 2 events. I think you're just going to go to the highest bidder, whoever wants to pay the most to have you there. But when you look at this weight, I mean, how excited are you about some of those matchups?
I just have so many question marks right now. I know Chad Redd's going to be ready come national time. He is every year. He's proved it every year. So we know he's going to be there in the running to be another All-American. I was just thinking of the tiers at this weight, and I just don't know yet. I don't know Sebastian, Stefan. I got to see them wrestle this year and kind of see where they're at because, you could possibly put them in tier 1. Right now, I'd say it's Lee and Ironman tier 1, and then, those 2 in the next tier. But, until we see them get some competition in, that's a big jump from 125 at the Olympics to 141 in collegiate wrestling. So I want to see him wrestle a little bit before I kind of make a decision what I think.
I think Misik Duncan is fascinating. You go from a guy that wrestled 125.4 in his last match versus a guy who wrestled 149.0 in his last match.
Yep.
And GT, just so you know, Mark is that dude. He's on a first name basis with Misik and Rivera. He don't even need to use last names. The rest of us just out here humble trying to talk about people. So
Yeah, but I know him personally. They're
that's what
great
I'm saying. You're that guy. You're
Yeah,
that guy.
I'm that guy.
Okay. 49, Josh Heil, number 17, beats Sherman, number 8. Cam Robinson beats Zach Price. Bo Bartlett, I don't think this is a surprise, but he was the lower ranked wrestler, beats PJ Ogunsanya. And then G Feller beats Blockus. And G had looked terrible the week before against Jade Nabbis. Ridge Lovett beats Zach Sherman. And Jade Nabbis didn't win, but went a good 3-1 match with Yanni. So just to set the table here, Yanni's at 49. This is what I had been told all along. Knowing Josh Saunders, he's like in some contact tracing stuff right now, but he'll probably be ready by Cliff Keen. Here's a guy that's not even in the rankings that's super talented. To me, the hardest one to figure out is G Feller. So I'll start with you, Grant, because we watched the match together. He is like maybe your typical high ceiling, low basement kind of guy. What do you think he has to do to sort of get to that consistent level that Oklahoma State needs from him? Because on his best day, he's like a multiple time Southern Scubble finalist and champion, and can get on the podium when he's wrestling right.
I think with John, he just wants consistency. He doesn't want to ride the roller coaster of like, hey, you're really, really good and you can go beat whoever it is. Let's go, like he beats Yanni or something crazy.
Sure.
Then he loses to somebody that's, I would say, of a lesser caliber.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey man, you can be the same guy all the time. So if G Feller can basically figure that out and be more in the consistent path, I think John's gonna be happier with that. And he looked like kind of his old self against Blockus. Like he gave up the first takedown, but he just went about his business and looked pretty dang good. And Blockus is a very, very, very capable, proven wrestler. So that's a big win for him to maybe spark some confidence and get to that consistent basis.
I agree. So Marco, you had lost your mind here a couple weeks ago. This ranking has Diakom Hollis above Sasso, so all is right in your world. You don't have to blow a gasket before Thanksgiving. You were on fire that day.
Yes, I was.
And Mikey Carr, it looks like they flip-flopped Carr, back up to 49, so he pops in. Sherman takes the big tumble from, he just drops below Heil. They didn't meet him in the middle, which is interesting. And then G Feller just moves up a couple spots. And I guess they had Blockus ranked a lot lower than some other people did. To me, this is an interesting weight because, Tariq's never made the finals. Yaya's never made the finals. Literally nobody's made the finals here except the top two. Do you feel like it's Yanni and Sasso in tier 1, Mark, and then sort of a big tier 2?
Yeah, right now, Tariq is the one, is the big question mark where he's going to end up in the tiers. How good is he going to be at 49? He's so talented and he's so good on top, but so are the two guys that are in front of him. So I'm not sure he's there at that tier. But you had talked about Josh Heil. Remember last year at the national tournament, it was a very questionable call. He could have been in the quarterfinals wrestling Max Murin to get into the semis. So, it wasn't a stretch for him to beat that guy. I'm not sure I would consider that an upset. This guy is very talented from Campbell, and I think he's going to be right in the hunt when it comes time in March of this next year.
Yeah, no doubt. That was the match with Bulu Wallen with the clock stoppage and everything else. So, yeah, for sure. Okay, so we go to 157. David Carr wins, but Peyton Robb might have had the best week of anybody. He beats O'Connor and then loses to Carr in overtime, I believe. Robb, as it says here, beats O'Connor. Slivka beat Chase Aldati. Tommy Askey beat Parker Kropman. Quincy Monday beat Caleb Young. None of those are – Peyton Robb's the huge upset, obviously. And it made sense a little bit that O'Connor, they're on the road, is, he's up at 157. But the big mover here is Peyton Robb. He goes from 16 to 6. That has a huge impact on the team race, which we're going to try to get to. O'Connor drops here from 2 to 7. And then Quincy Monday, pops up above Caleb Young. Quincy Monday looked really good in that match, looked really comfortable. GT, pretty good bloodlines for Quincy. What do you think his ceiling is?
He looked pretty dang good inside Carver. He motion was good and all that kind of stuff. But I think his ceiling is, he could be really dangerous. He poses a very, very physical challenges. He's very long, he's strong, he's got good angles. And then Peyton Robb, big shout out to the Pinnacle Wrestling School up there in Minneapolis. Give those guys a ton of credit. That's that's a Pinnacle guy there.
Yeah.
Might be, definitely making the headlines to start the season. Big Ten beating Austin, wrestling Carr super close. Like, he could be really dangerous coming down from 65 to 57 now. So, and those guys are right next to each other. So Monday and Rob, I don't know if those guys are on the schedule with each other, but that would be a good matchup. I'd love to see both those guys early this season to see how that shakes out.
Yeah. And how about Peyton Robb's schedule 2-1, and 2 of his 3 matches are against defending national champions. Nice strength of schedule for Nebraska. So, Mark, it feels like in the top 5, really top 6, you have 2 or 3 super high octane guys in Carr, Teamer, Monday. And then you got 3 guys that are hammers in Deacon, Lee, and Peyton Robb. Lee looked good against Sheets in the dual meet. So to me, it feels like these could be some awesome, either grinder against grinder, or maybe grinder against, high motion, quick guys. Some awesome matchups here, right?
Yeah, first of all, I need to give Grant a shout out for picking Brayton Lee to almost major. Sheets to me is a quality kid at this weight. I think he's been good for a long time, and he just seems to get better. But boy, what a beating that Lee put on him. Lee is by far a real deal. I think he just made huge strides over this off season. I think he is going to be in contention at that weight. I would not want to wrestle him anymore. If I was one of these guys, he looked phenomenal. So, and Rob had a phenomenal weekend. He was in that match with the number 1 ranked kid in the country. Went into overtime, got taken down. Actually, wasn't sure if he was even going to get taken down with 20 seconds left, and kind of lost the position that he was in, and he ended up getting scored on, and then, a nice quick duck under and go behind there to win in overtime for Iowa State. But it's going to be a good weight. I think don't look at just top 2 or 3 guys. I think you could go down a couple more that are going to make some real noise.
Yeah. Quincy Monday seems like he's got the athleticism to stay in a match with David Carr. I don't know if they wrestle, but a Monday Carr, they've wrestled before. Obviously their dads wrestled a bunch back in the 80s, So, yep. All right, 165, the biggest probably upset beside the 2 biggest upsets were Shane Griffith and O'Connor. He loses in a super controversial match to Ramirez. Meyer, probably a bigger upset, beats Wenzel, and then a couple of other minor upsets here. So I'm just going to focus on the top here. I struggle with this. This is why I had a fit that Alex Marinelli was number 2, because now he's number 1, and he's ranked number 1 ahead of Wick, who was an All-American the last time he wrestled, O'Toole, who was an All-American the last time he wrestled, Griffith, who was a national champion the last time he wrestled, Whitlake, All-American, Valencia, All-American, Romero, All-American. So if I had done the rankings, Marinelli would be 8, maybe 9th, because Hartman was an All-American. And I get the rankings don't matter, but when we get to the team race and we look at the difference between 20 points and 5.5 points, you're going to see that that's a huge difference. So I don't want to get into a bunch about the Griffith match. If you've seen the video, it looks pretty clear that he got 2 and they didn't call it. It felt like some home cooking. The problem with that is Stanford doesn't wrestle the deepest schedule, and that's going to hurt him on record, which is a criteria, and on head-to-heads if any of these other guys wrestle Ramirez and beat them. So he could be an underseeded guy at nationals based on a pretty terrible call. Wenzel drops from 4 to 11, and Griffith drops from 1 to 4. There's a couple different ways. Obviously, you could have done that. You know, I mean, I don't really know what you do there. So I will not ask you guys what you think of where Marinelli should be ranked because you're both in Iowa.
Well, that's not fair, though. I mean,
Okay, go ahead, Mark. Where do you think Marinelli should be ranked?
I'm not sure. That's not the point. The point is I can justify what they're thinking. He's beaten Evan Wick. He's beaten Evan Wick the last 5 times in a row they've wrestled. That does have to count for something. He did medically default out of the national tournament. They've never counted that against kids during the season. So they're not counting it against, Alex now. He was the number 1 seed going into the national tournament, undefeated going into nationals last year. So I'm not saying it's right, but I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying I understand why they did it. They're going by their criteria. Number 1 seed last year, lost the closest match that Griffith had at the national tournament by a point in overtime, or by a takedown in overtime. He's beaten Wick. He's beaten Whitlake. He's beaten pretty much everybody on this board. Nobody's really beaten him besides, Griffin in the semi or in the quarter.
He hasn't wrestled O'Toole.
He has not wrestled O'Toole. And
I
I think O'Toole, you could have an argument O'Toole should be the number 1 seed.
That'd be my argument.
So, I mean, there's different ways to look at it. I understand maybe why they did it. I didn't say I agree with it, but I don't really disagree. I think time will tell. It's all going to work itself out because Marinelli's going to wrestle, a bunch of these good guys.
Obviously, I mean, that always shakes. That's why Okay, GT, you want to chime in here? How would you do it?
I mean, I don't have a problem with Marinelli being the number 1 ranked guy in the nation right now. I mean, I think to all of our credit, we can get lost in the sauce and beat who and, COVID year and not and all that kind of stuff. But I think for right now, I mean, I like having Griffith at 4, with a whatever suspect loss. I didn't think that he should have dropped any further than that. So I think it's, I don't have a problem with it right now. I mean, to all of our points, there's a lot of season left. So it will get itself worked out.
Lost in the sauce. I'm stealing that one. I like that a lot. So I like that. I'm trying to sound younger. That's mine. Happy Thanksgiving, GT. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
All right. Nothing to really speak of at 74. 18 lost to 16, or 74 rather. 84. Caleb Hopkins had a bad weekend. The big result is Marcus Coleman beat Venz, and we can look real quick. I don't think there's a whole lot of changes here. Venz drops from 10 to 17, and Coleman moves up from 19 to 16. Really nothing else changed there. So I don't, this will give us a little more time to talk about the team rankings. 97, again, not much. Cam Caffey loses, so that's not great for him. And then let's talk about 285. So Cassiopei's winning, about to turn and pin this guy. And what's GT, the technical name for that move is a jelly roll. Is that correct? Is that what I was thinking?
That was something that I saw on Twitter, but I don't think that there's a technical term for as you're getting pinned to belly bump and neck bridge out of it. So that was really funny that I saw on Twitter, but yeah, we talked about it, calling it the jelly roll or whatever. So
I got to give that kid credit. He did trap his head. Like, it doesn't look like it was a complete accident. Like, it's
there is some technique to it. There is some stuff like to roll through, Bo Nickel, there's guys that probably know some tricks from there, but he was pretty much dead to rights and Tony just kind of rushed it a little bit. And then that kid used all that momentum to pinch the head, bump, roll over. Once again, have yourself a day, you go pin a world champion inside Carver
Yeah.
Celebrate as much as you want, man. That's, I mean,
And he
that's
did
historic.
this like a savage.
In front of 14, 15,000 people trying to hush the crowd. I mean, that's a baller move. So, hey, congratulations. That's a great win for that kid.
Yeah.
I don't know much about him other than this match, but maybe that's the difference that makes him, wrestle a lot better this year. So,
well, it's a huge win on his resume. Well, I think the one thing we do know is he's pretty smart if he got into Princeton. He's probably a pretty bright kid. So, Mark, I know we're going to say this. We say this, it all shakes out, but now Cassioppi's at 7, which is 6 in the Big Ten. I don't know which of these guys he'll wrestle during the year. Obviously he could work his way back up. But the interesting thing I think is this, and you can comment on this, as guys in the Big Ten lose, that helps Colton Schultz a lot. Because if Colton Schultz can run the table and be undefeated, he's probably going to be the 2 seed at nationals, which like you don't want to be the 4 seed like at heavyweight or 285 with Gable Stevenson there, right? Like you go from Olympic champion, I don't care how good all the rest of these guys are, that's a massive drop off, right?
Yeah, it is. You want to definitely be on the bottom side because Gable is on a mountain all by himself, and he should be.
Yeah.
So then down on these little back hills are the rest of the guys because Gable's a major better than pretty much anybody in that list. So there's not even an argument there. So I think I would want to be on the bottom side. And I don't know if Tony just kind of shot himself in the foot. He's going to wrestle pretty much everybody from the Big Ten that's ahead of him. He'll wrestle against Penn State. He'll wrestle against Michigan. He'll wrestle Ohio State. He's going to wrestle Minnesota. So, I mean, he's going to wrestle all these guys that are ahead of him so he can work himself back into that, that tier. And like you said, at nationals, there's a good chance Schultz could be undefeated going into the national tournament. I don't think that's going to happen because I think I think Paris is going to be at the Cliff Keen, if I'm not mistaken, and I think Arizona State's going to be there. So he's going to wrestle, somebody unless he doesn't wrestle in it or Paris doesn't wrestle.
Yeah, I actually talked to Arizona State this morning, and the matchups came out for that Christmas event, the pseudo national duels, and It's not national duels at all. But Arizona State's in the same pool as Virginia Tech, so that'll be a fairly good match. And then they cross over to Penn State, so we could see, assuming they both win their pools, Penn State wins their pool and ASU wins their pool, and there's no disrespect to Virginia Tech, they could easily win that duel. But if they won their duel and Penn State wins their pool, then you could see a potential Schultz-Kirkfleet matchup, which is obviously, would have a ton of impact.
Yep.
We talked about handcuffs. It goes all the way back to when Ramos got pinned by Cologne. There's that handcuff where you're like, okay, Joe Cologne becomes Tony Ramos' biggest fan because everybody he beats, you have criteria over. Okay, so this takes us to the team race, which I think is really fascinating now, because again, if I were ranking this and holding everything else constant, I'd have Penn State at 1 because I would have Marinelli significantly lower than he is. And the other part of this, which we talked about, is it's very, very strong rumor that Hildebrand is at Penn State. He would probably plug in somewhere 5 through 7, which would make this thing like pretty much a dead heat and come down to bonus points. That's clearly tier 1. In these rankings, it feels like Arizona State's kind of in its own tier. Then Oklahoma State, Michigan, and NC State are in another tier. And then it gets real thick between Northwestern, really all the way down to Nebraska or even Rutgers. So let's not talk about Iowa, Penn State, because I know we're going to talk about that a bunch. We made our picks. I don't even remember. I have them in the document somewhere. Like, I think I had Cornell as taking 5th or something like that. When you look at this, like, do you see it as they see it now? It'll finish this way, ASU, Oklahoma State, or Michigan. And if you don't, Mark, who do you see sort of wrestling above their ranking right now to help those other schools, go higher?
Well, I watched Oklahoma State wrestle Minnesota, and I have a hard time believing that they're not going to be probably the third best team in the country. They looked awfully good. And I think their young guys are just going to keep getting better. I think they're making a real push. So I think Oklahoma State's going to be really solid. We haven't really seen much about Michigan yet because they haven't wrestled with all their guys. So those are kind of the question marks, at 141, 184. How are those guys going to be doing? Because they could both technically be in the finals. They're good enough. So if you do that, then Michigan's going to be right up there. So Ohio State's going to be a pretty good team. They really are. They got some young kids, and they're just going to keep getting better. This, to me, besides the top two teams, David, this is going to be one heck of a national tournament because it is so loaded. And if you have 5 All-Americans, and I'm just talking All-Americans, you're going to have a shot at being in the top 5 because there's just so many good kids there.
You're going to have 2 finalists if it's only 5 All-Americans. But I mean, you can't have 5 7th place guys, but I get your point and I agree with it. So GT, I guess sort of the same question, and I'll add in, it's been announced Arizona State is going to duel Michigan, I think on January 3rd or 4th down in Austin, Texas. So, I mean, that's nice. We're going to see a matchup we don't normally see in the regular season, right?
Yep.
To me, the one that kind of falls off here is Missouri's down at 11, actually tied for 11. So maybe 11/12. Like I look at Nebraska, Missouri, Minnesota, Virginia Tech, Cornell, all within 5.5 points of each other. Am I crazy to think that one of those teams could jump in the top 4 or 5, Grant?
Yeah. I mean, once again, I think if you look at, I would say let's say 4 through, let's call it 15.
Okay.
One of those guys, I mean, you get a finalist, it's automatically what, 16 points?
Yeah.
So you have a couple of maybe guys stumble and some of those other guys make finals or get third or into the 3rd and 4th place match. I mean, that's the wrinkle between all of these programs right here. Cause I think, Missouri, you're going to tell me that out of, maybe all of their roster that they're not going to have maybe one guy in the finals and then the other guys are all going to collectively score 16 points. I don't think that's very accurate. Because I think O'Toole himself could probably score 16 to 20 points.
Yeah.
Then you got a whole bunch of other guys that are going to probably win matches or be in the hunt for All-Americanships. But I just think that this number between maybe 3rd and 15th, I think you're going to see a ton of teams with 60 to 40 some odd points. I think it's all going to be a little bit more elevated for these teams because Nebraska's got some dogs too.
Yeah.
So, once again, I don't think Nebraska, that's, 31 points. I think they could do a little bit better than that. I think Rutgers could do better than that.
Yeah, Nebraska benefited from Rob, but suffered with Red, right? They moved a guy into the top 8 and another one bounced out of the top 8. But if both those guys ended in the top 8, it wouldn't shock you. Eric Schultz is probably ranked pretty low, and obviously he could do really well. That's the whole thing. There's 80 All-Americans, and right now, if you talk to coaches, there's 240 of them, right?
Right. Well,
yeah.
I think also that's the story with Cornell. Same thing. Yanni can put on bonus points, and so can, Vito and all of the other young up and coming talent that they have. But
yeah,
once again, 37 points for Cornell. I think that number's a shy low, just because I think that those guys are more benefited to, where they currently are.
Yeah. A lot of those guys will probably outperform their ranking, or seed if the seeds were today. So one of the things we did a couple of years ago, and it's just been a little hectic this year, but we used to keep the rankings every week. So all on one document. So I'll see if maybe we can do that and go back. And it's interesting to track and see where those schools go up and down and the trends and all that kind of stuff. And you can really point to stuff like what if a kid drops out or a kid jumps in, those kind of things. So I just want to say this, I have a lot to be thankful for this year. Besides COVID, which was like a blip on the radar, this has been one of the best years of my life. Had a chance to travel a bunch for with USA Wrestling or wrestling events, do the Big 12s, do the Olympic trials. GT, I know, spent 26 days, I think it was, in Tokyo. I get to do this with you guys on USA Wrestling, the premier platform in the country, and blessed to just have friends all over the country. And in spite of a little COVID bout, I have my health, and I have two guys. Be able to count you two as two of my dearest friends is a real blessing. So I just want to say publicly, happy Thanksgiving. You guys, we each got about 30 seconds. So GT, if you want to say anything special, go, and Mark, and then we'll sign off.
Just happy Thanksgiving to all the listeners, everybody at USA Wrestling, especially to Dave and Mark. Enjoy time with your families. Looking forward to a great year with everybody.
Marco?
Yeah, I already wished everybody happy Thanksgiving. I think today I'm going to go up in the Grandview Wrestling Room and put on a little exhibition for Grant, see what's going on. I can't move my right knee yet, though, so I don't know how I'm going to do this because it's kind of sore. So
I don't know if eating chicken wings counts as an exhibition.
we're not having chicken wings today, David. But yeah, I'm just, being able to talk on this platform. I got to do a podcast with somebody. I'm not going to say who it was, but
30 seconds. Go.
Guy about Tony Davis. So I got to do that last week, and it's just reminiscent about the things that I've been through in the last, 30 years, 40 years in this sport. And it was fun to do and talk and reminisce about things like that. And that's what, this whole sport is about, is making memories and relationships throughout our lives. And not a better sport out there in the world.
Much love to everybody who watches, listens, shares. Shout out to my guy, Kelly Heinecker, for helping me last night. Thank you guys all. Talk to y'all next week.